Ma'am, are you hurt anywhere?
The older woman, her coat soaking wet, looked up at the black girl in her worn clothes who was clutching her belongings.
They don't care about me.
The woman whispered.
They just want me to leave soon. I have no home.
Faith Carter had been fired that morning. Her daughter hadn't eaten anything. $5 was her only remaining money. She still handed it to the trembling stranger, then took off her thin coat and draped it over the girl's shaking shoulders. "You can come home with me tonight. It's not spacious, but it's warm," Faith said. "Let's go." The poorest girl in the neighborhood had just given away everything. The next morning, 5 limousines pulled up in front of the black girl's house, causing a commotion in the neighborhood. 8 hours earlier, the morning had started the way every morning started, with Faith pretending. "Ow, you're pulling!" Lily squirmed on the kitchen chair, all elbows and giggles. "Hold still, baby, one more braid." Faith worked the comb through her daughter's hair with hands that already knew how to be gentle when everything else hurt. 4 years old, 2 missing socks, 1 unstoppable smile. "There, prettiest girl in Georgia." "Prettiest girl in the world," Lily corrected, and Faith said, "My mistake. Because some corrections you let your daughter win." She slid half a peanut butter sandwich across the table and kept the other half wrapped in a napkin in her bag. That was lunch. Hers. She'd learned long ago that you fed the child first and called your own hunger a diet. The apartment was small enough to cross in 9 steps. She'd counted on the nights she couldn't sleep. With mismatched curtains, a radiator that knocked like a fist, and, taped to the door where she couldn't miss it, a notice she still hadn't found the courage to open. She knew what it said. She didn't need the words to feel the cold coming through that envelope. She left it sealed, kissed Lily's forehead, and walked her down to the neighbors. "Miss Della's gonna watch you while I work. Be good for her." Lily held up her pinky. "Promise you'll bring dinner?" Faith hooked it with her own. Promise. She would spend the rest of the day trying to keep that promise. At the distribution center, the air smelled of cardboard and floor wax, and Faith moved fast, stacked clean, never complained, because she was good at this and had hoped good might be enough. It wasn't. "Carter." The shift manager didn't look up from his clipboard. "Corporate's cutting hours. Last in, first out. I'm sorry." She kept her voice level, even as the floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "I've got perfect attendance. I cover other people's shifts. I never call out." "I know. I have a daughter. Rent's due Friday." "I know, Faith." He finally met her eyes, and the worst part was that he meant it. "It's not you. It's a number on a spreadsheet in some tower downtown. None of us are people up there. We're just costs they're cutting." A tower downtown. A number instead of a name. She would remember that later, when she learned exactly whose tower it was. She didn't cry. She budgeted her tears the way she budgeted everything, sparingly and never in public. And on her way out, with her own world quietly collapsing, she still stopped to steady a coworker's toppling stack of boxes. "You just got let go and you're helping me?" the woman said, and Faith shrugged. Boxes don't know whose week it is. Because that was simply who she was when no one was keeping score, and when everyone was. Outside, the sky had gone the color of wet concrete, and she walked because the bus cost money, and money had just become a creature she'd have to feed 1 coin at a time. She passed Ruby's Diner, where warm gold light spilled onto the sidewalk and the smell of fries reached out like a hand, and her stomach folded in on itself. Inside, the cashier, Nora, caught her eye and lifted a coffee pot in invitation. Faith smiled, shook her head, and kept walking, because she didn't take what she couldn't pay for. Not coffee, not pity, not anything. At the corner store, she slid her hand into her pocket and counted by feel, hoping, the way you hope a thing might multiply if you want it badly enough. 1 $5 bill. That was the number now. The whole number. Bread, she decided. Bread stretched. Bread became toast, became the bottom of a soup, became 3 more days of telling Lily that Mama wasn't hungry. She was rehearsing the lie. Mama already ate, baby, when the rain broke open over Atlanta, and 6 blocks away, beneath a bus shelter, a woman in a soaked designer coat began to cry. Faith didn't know her yet. She didn't know the woman owned the very tower where a stranger had reduced her whole life to a line item that morning, or that the $5 folded in her pocket would, before the night was out, become the most important money in the city. She only knew it was raining, and she was cold, and her little girl was waiting on a promise, so she pulled her thin coat tighter, lowered her head, and walked straight toward the thing that would change everything. The bus shelter was the only dry square on the block, and even that was losing the fight. Rain came in sideways, sheeting off the broken gutter above, and under it, folded small on the bench, was the woman. Faith almost walked past. She had a promise to keep, a daughter to feed, a $5 plan with no room in it for anyone else. But the sound stopped her. Not loud, not dramatic. A small, broken sound, the kind you make when you've stopped expecting anyone to hear. "Ma'am?" Faith ducked under the shelter. "Ma'am, are you hurt anywhere?" The woman lifted her face. 70s, silver hair plastered to her cheeks, a coat worth more than everything Faith owned. But her eyes were the thing. Faith had seen that look in the mirror, the look of someone doing the math on their own life and coming up short. "I'm fine," the woman said, in a voice that wasn't. She reached for a purse that wasn't there, and her hands shook harder. "My phone, my wallet, a young man, when I sat down." Understanding arrived on her face like a second cold front. "He took everything. I didn't even feel it." "Okay," Faith crouched to her level. "Do you have someone I can call? Family?" The word landed wrong. The woman laughed, a wet, awful sound. "Family? No, not the kind you mean." She wiped her face. "I heard them tonight. My sons. They didn't know I was on the line. Talking about arrangements. What happens after? One of them said it would be easier if I just—" She couldn't finish. She didn't have to. Something tightened in Faith's chest. She knew about being a line item. She hadn't known it happened to people in coats like that, too. "What's your name?" Faith asked. "Eleanor." "Eleanor, I'm Faith." Down the empty street, the last bus's taillights vanished into the rain. Eleanor had no money, no phone, and was shaking now in a way that frightened Faith, the bone-deep shiver of a body giving up its heat. She thought about the bread, the pinky promise, Lily's voice, "Promise you'll bring dinner." Then she pressed the $5 bill into Eleanor's shaking hands. "It's not much, but it's a hot coffee and a phone call and a minute to think. Take it." Eleanor stared at the crumpled bill. "You don't even know me." "You're cold and scared and alone," Faith said. "I know enough." And then Faith did the thing she could never fully explain afterward. The thing that cost her more than the money. She unzipped her own thin coat, the only barrier between her and the freezing rain, and draped it over Eleanor's shaking shoulders. The cold hit her instantly, soaking through her shirt. She didn't take it back. Eleanor's composure cracked, and she gripped Faith's wrist with both hands. "Please don't leave me out here, please." "I'm not leaving you. Come on, there's a diner 2 blocks up." Eleanor leaned on her the whole way. Ruby's diner glowed ahead like a lighthouse. At the door, the night doorman from the hotel across the street, a broad, gray-templed man named Walter Briggs, froze mid-step when he saw them. "Mrs. Whitmore, my God, security's been looking everywhere for you. Where's your detail?" Eleanor only shook her head, too cold to answer. Faith didn't catch the name or its weight. She was already steering Eleanor toward the warmth. "She got robbed. Phone, wallet, everything. She needs to warm up and call someone safe. Can you help her?" "Of course." Walter took Eleanor's other side, then looked at Faith, drenched, shivering, no coat. "Miss, you're soaked through. Let me get you a towel, a ride home." "I'm okay." Faith was already backing toward the door, teeth chattering. "She's the one who needs it. Just take care of her." "At least tell me your name," Walter called. But Faith was already gone, out into the rain, walking home empty-handed with a promise she could no longer keep. Behind her, under the warm gold light, Eleanor Whitmore, chairwoman of Whitmore Realty, worth more than most small countries, clutched a stranger's $5 and a stranger's worn coat, and cried now for an entirely different reason. Across the street, the Whitmore-owned hotel swallowed Eleanor in marble and brass. and the kind of warmth money buys without thinking twice. Staff swarmed. A doctor was summoned. Someone draped a cashmere blanket over the cheap, wet coat she refused to remove. "Mrs. Whitmore, we have to call your sons," her assistant, Nora Bishop, said gently, phone already in hand. "No." The word came out sharper than Eleanor intended. Softer than, "No, not them, not tonight." Nora lowered the phone. 19 years working for Eleanor had taught her the difference between a command and a wound. What Nora didn't know, what no one knew, was how Eleanor had ended up at that bus stop in the first place. 3 hours earlier, in her penthouse, Eleanor had picked up the wrong extension at the wrong moment and heard her own sons on the line, speaking freely because they thought she wasn't there. "She's 71 and she still won't sign," Spencer had said, that smooth boardroom voice she'd taught him to use. "The doctors say her mind's fine, which is the problem. We need her declared incompetent, or we wait for nature, and nature is taking its sweet time." And Bradley, her baby, her youngest, had laughed. A nervous laugh, but a laugh. "Don't say it like that, Spence." "Like what? Like we both know it's true?" Eleanor had set the receiver down with a steadiness that astonished her, walked past her security detail, told her driver she wanted air, and dismissed them all at the corner. She'd wanted, just once, to stand in the world like an ordinary woman and not a fortune in a coat. To be no one's inheritance. She'd walked until the rain found her, sat down on a stranger's bench, and discovered that ordinary women get robbed in the dark and left to freeze. And then an ordinary woman had stopped, had given her $5 and the coat off her own back, and asked for nothing. Now, in a suite that cost more per night than Faith earned in a month, Eleanor turned the worn coat over in her hands. There was a name written in faded marker on the inside collar, the way you label a child's things. F. Carter. And folded into the pocket, a half-eaten peanut butter sandwich wrapped in a napkin. Someone's lunch. Someone's whole dinner, maybe. Eleanor pressed the napkin to her mouth and wept. Not the brittle, frightened tears from the bus stop, but something deeper, something that felt almost like grief and almost like waking up. "Nora," she said finally, "I want you to find her, the young woman who brought me in tonight. F. Carter." Her voice steadied into the one that had built an empire. "Tonight. Pull the street cameras, talk to Walter, do whatever it takes. I don't want to thank her with a card. I want to look her in the eye." "And your sons?" Nora asked carefully. "They'll hear you went missing. They'll come." Eleanor looked out at the rain still falling over her city, her towers, her holdings, her name on half the skyline, and felt, for the first time in years, that almost none of it was actually hers. "Let them come," she said quietly. "I have some questions for my sons. But first, I want to meet the only person in this city who treated me like I was worth saving when I had nothing." She didn't yet know Faith's address. She didn't yet know that the eviction notice taped to Faith's door carried a logo Eleanor would recognize instantly. Her own. She only knew she would find her by morning, and she would. With 5 cars, because Eleanor Whitmore had never in her life done anything small. Faith hadn't slept. She'd come home soaked to the bone, peeled off her wet shirt, and stood over Lily's bed for a long time, watching the small chest rise and fall. There'd been no dinner. There'd been a broken pinky promise, and a mother who lay awake doing arithmetic that never came out right. By dawn, she'd decided she would pawn her grandmother's ring, the last thing of value she owned, and buy 3 days. 3 days to find work, 3 days to keep the roof. She was lacing her shoes when the street outside began to growl. Lily reached the window first. "Mama, Mama, come look!" Faith looked, and her stomach dropped through the floor. 5 black limousines had turned onto her street, long, gleaming, impossibly out of place among the chain-link fences and the leaning mailboxes. Neighbors stepped onto their porches in robes and house shoes. Phones came up. On a block where a nice car meant trouble, repo, or worse, 5 of them meant catastrophe. Faith's first thought wasn't wonder, it was fear. The eviction. They've come to put us out. They've sent an army to throw a woman and her baby into the street. She gripped Lily's hand. "Stay behind me, baby." The doors of the lead car opened. a driver, an assistant with a tablet, and then, slowly, a silver-haired woman in a fresh wool coat. And Faith's whole body went still because she knew that face. She'd watched it cry in the rain 12 hours ago. "You," Faith breathed. "Me," Eleanor agreed. For a moment the two women just looked at each other across the cracked pavement. The chairwoman and the unemployed single mother. The fortune and the $5. Two worlds that were never supposed to share a sidewalk. Faith's mind raced to catch up. The hotel, the doorman calling her a name. Mrs. Whitmore. "Oh my God, you're Eleanor Whitmore. Whitmore Realty. Your name is on the, you own half the," she stopped. "And I gave you $5. "You gave me everything you had," Eleanor said. "There's a difference. I've spent 50 years around people who give from the top of the pile. You're the first person in longer than I can remember who gave from the bottom of it." She glanced at the limousines, almost embarrassed. "I'm sorry about the cars. I didn't know which house. I'm told I overdo things." A nervous laugh escaped Faith before she could stop it. "May I come in?" Eleanor asked. "I'd like to repay a kindness, properly." Inside, the apartment that took 9 steps to cross suddenly held a billionaire. Eleanor didn't flinch at the knocking radiator or the mismatched curtains. She crouched instead to Lily's level. "And who is this?" "I'm Lily. Are you a queen?" "No," Eleanor said. "But your mama is the closest thing to royalty I've met in a long time." Then she straightened, opened her bag, and set a checkbook on the table. "I want to clear this up simply. Whatever you owe, rent, bills, all of it, and enough besides that you and Lily never spend another night the way you spent last night. Name the number. Don't be shy with it." And here Faith did the thing Eleanor would tell the story about for the rest of her life. She slid the checkbook back across the table. "No," Faith said quietly. Eleanor blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I didn't help you for this." Faith's voice was steady, even as her hands weren't. "If I take a check now, then last night had a price on it. It didn't. I stopped because you were a person, and you were freezing, and that's all. I'm not going to let it turn into a transaction," she swallowed. "I'm not too proud to need help, Mrs. Whitmore. I'm scared, and I'm broke, and I don't know how I'm feeding my daughter next week. But I won't be paid for being decent. That's the one thing I've got left that's still mine." The room went silent. Eleanor Whitmore, who negotiated with senators who'd stared down hostile boards, found she had absolutely nothing prepared to say. "Then let me ask differently," she said at last, slowly. "Not a gift, a fair chance. You've lost your job. Let me offer you honest work, earned, where you can look me in the eye every day and know you owe me nothing. Will you at least let me do that?" Faith hesitated, and in that hesitation, her eyes drifted to the door, to the eviction notice she still hadn't found the courage to open. Eleanor followed her gaze. "May I?" Eleanor crossed to the door before Faith could answer and peeled the envelope free. She slid out the notice, scanned it, and Faith watched the older woman's face change in a way she didn't understand yet. The color drained. The warmth hardened into something cold and precise. Eleanor read it twice. At the top of the eviction notice, beneath the threat to remove Faith and Lily within 30 days, sat a logo. A small navy crest Eleanor had approved herself a decade ago. The managing company, Vance Property Group, and beneath it, in fine gray print, a Whitmore Realty Company. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Faith said. "What is it?" Eleanor lowered the page. When she spoke, her voice had gone very quiet and very dangerous. "Faith, the company trying to put you and your daughter out on the street." She turned the notice around so Faith could see the crest. "It's mine. This is my company. You gave your last $5 to the very woman whose name is on the paper throwing you away." Faith stared at the logo, then at Eleanor, and the two worlds that were never supposed to share a sidewalk collapsed into one. "I didn't know," Faith whispered. "I know you didn't," Eleanor said. "Neither did I." Which is its own kind of crime. She folded the notice and slid it into her coat like evidence. "But I'm going to find out exactly who signed this. And I'm going to find out how many other doors in this city are wearing my name like a threat." She looked at Lily, then at Faith. "You wouldn't take my money. Fine. But you're going to let me fix what my own company did to you. That isn't charity. That's a debt. And it's mine, not yours. Outside, 5 engines idled, waiting. Inside, something far larger than $5 had just begun to change hands. For a few days, the world went quiet in the best way. Eleanor made one phone call, and the eviction simply stopped. Frozen, she said, pending review. The knot Faith had carried in her chest for months loosened just enough to let her breathe. She started real work at the Whitmore Community Office, sorting tenant complaints into folders Eleanor insisted on reading herself. Faith was good at it. She knew these names. She'd lived these names. In the evenings, something stranger happened. Eleanor began to visit, not as a chairwoman. She left the cars 2 blocks away now, but as a woman with nowhere else she'd rather be. She sat on Faith's second-hand couch and let Lily braid her silver hair into crooked, joyful disasters. "Hold still," Lily commanded. "I'm holding," Eleanor laughed, and the sound surprised her, like a language she'd forgotten she spoke. One night, after Lily was asleep, the 2 women sat with cooling tea, and Eleanor finally said it out loud. "I have 2 sons," she began, "Spencer and Bradley. I gave them everything, trusts, titles, the best of everything money buys." She turned her cup in her hands. "And the night you found me, I just heard them on the phone discussing how much simpler their lives would be once I was dead. Not sad, not afraid, planning, like I was a property they were waiting to inherit." Faith didn't fill the silence with comfort. She just listened, the way you listen to someone telling you the truest thing they own. "And then a stranger with $5 treated me like I mattered," Eleanor went on, her voice thick. "You gave me everything when you had nothing. They'd take everything and still feel I owed them more." She looked up. "I spent my whole life building an empire to leave behind. I never once asked whether I was leaving behind anything worth having." "You've still got time," Faith said softly, "to leave the right thing." Eleanor studied her, this young woman who refused checks and asked for nothing, and something settled in her, quiet and certain. "Yes," she said, "I believe I do." Neither of them knew that 2 floors up in a glass tower across town, a petition was already being drafted with Eleanor's name on it, and that the quiet was about to end. The petition arrived on a Tuesday, hand-delivered, thick as a phone book, in the matter of the competency of Eleanor M. Whitmore. Spencer's lawyers had been thorough. They cited her age. They cited erratic recent behavior. A chairwoman who'd dismissed her own security, wandered the city alone at night, been found disoriented and weeping at a public bus stop, and then attached herself to an unknown young woman of no means, to whom she was now diverting company resources and personal attention. Read cold, on paper, kindness looked exactly like a breakdown. Spencer came in person to deliver the second blow. He found his mother in her office, Faith at the desk beside her, and he did not bother to lower his voice. "You humiliated us," he said. "Do you understand what it does to the stock when the chairwoman is photographed soaking wet at a bus stop? When she starts handing out jobs to—" His eyes flicked over Faith, dismissive. "Strays?" "Her name is Faith," Eleanor said. "I don't care what her name is. I built half the value in this company while you were off finding yourself. I have a fiduciary duty to thousands of shareholders, and right now the single biggest risk to them is sitting in this chair." He set the petition on the desk. "I'm not the villain here, Mother. I'm the only one being responsible. Sign the transfer, retire with dignity, and this all goes quietly away. And if I don't, then a judge decides whether you're fit, and judges read newspapers." Spencer left, but Bradley lingered in the doorway a moment longer, not quite meeting his mother's eyes. "It doesn't have to be ugly, Mom," he said, and there was something in his voice, some fray at the edge, that didn't match his brother's certainty. Then he followed Spencer out. It was not an idle threat. Within 48 hours, the story broke. Billionaire's mystery breakdown, and the stranger now living off her fortune. There was a photo of Faith leaving the Whitmore office, captioned to make her look like a circling vulture. The comment sections did the rest. Gold digger, con artist, preying on a confused old woman. The same act of mercy that had saved Eleanor's life was rewritten, overnight, into a crime. What Eleanor and Faith didn't yet know was who had fed the story to the press, and why. 2 floors up in the glass tower, Preston Vance read the headline and smiled. Vance had built the property management arm into a profit machine, and he'd done it the way he did everything, by squeezing the people least able to fight back. Inflated fees, phantom repairs, evictions engineered to clear rent-controlled buildings for redevelopment. Faith's building was one of dozens, and now the chairwoman's pet project was sniffing around tenant complaints, with Faith, a former tenant, a sharp one, sitting right in the middle of it. So Vance made 2 calls. The first was to a contact at the hotel's security vendor. "That lobby footage from the night Mrs. Whitmore came in," he said pleasantly. "The storm corrupted the drives. Tragic. It's already been overwritten." It hadn't been. It was now. The second was to Walter Briggs. He summoned the doorman to a back office and slid a folder across the desk. Walter's file, his pension, his 3 grandkids' faces practically visible between the lines. "You've been with us a long time, Walter. Be ashamed to retire early over a misunderstanding." He smiled. "If anyone asks about that night, police, lawyers, reporters, you didn't see much. It was dark, it was raining. The old woman was confused, and the young one was, let's say, opportunistic. That's all you remember. Are we clear?" Walter looked at the folder. He looked at the door. He thought about his pension and his grandkids and the soaked young woman who'd refused a towel because someone else needed it more. "We're clear," he said quietly, and hated himself for it. Vance had one more move, and he made it himself, in person, in a parking garage where Faith was walking to the bus. He stepped out of a sedan, blocking her path. Expensive suit, easy smile, the most dangerous kind of calm. "Miss Carter, Preston Vance, I run the company you used to rent from." He didn't offer his hand. "I'll be brief. You're going to walk away from the Whitmores. Today, the old woman is going to be declared incompetent. That's already in motion. And when she is, anyone standing next to her gets buried with her, including you, including your little girl's housing situation, which I personally control." Faith's blood went cold. "You're threatening my daughter." "I'm describing reality." Vance leaned in, and for one moment the smile dropped and something true showed underneath. "Let me tell you something, since you think you're better than me. I grew up in a building exactly like yours. Cold radiator, eviction notices, a mother who skipped meals so I could eat. You know what kindness got her? Nothing. She died broke in the same apartment she was born poor in." His voice was almost gentle. "The Whitmores never saved anybody. They won't save you. The only people who get out are the ones who stop waiting to be rescued and start taking. I took." "That's not a reason," Faith said. "That's just a wound you decided to spread around." Vance straightened, the smile sliding back into place. 48 hours, Miss Carter. Walk away or watch what happens to people who don't." That night, Faith sat on her second-hand couch with Lily asleep against her and seriously considered running. Disappearing, protecting her daughter by simply giving up. She was still sitting there when her phone buzzed. Eleanor. "Don't you dare quit on me," Eleanor said before Faith could speak. "I know that's what you're thinking. I can hear it in the silence." "He threatened Lily, Eleanor. I know men like Vance. I made men like Vance, God forgive me." A breath. "They count on good people deciding that being good isn't worth the cost. So here is what we are not going to do. We are not going to let them turn the best thing either of us ever did into the reason we lose." Her voice hardened into the one that had built an empire, but aimed, now, at something better than profit. "Not this time. Not in my name. Get some sleep, Faith. Tomorrow, we fight back." 2 floors up, the petition moved forward. The footage was gone. The witness was bought. The story was set. And for the first time, the people who'd built their whole lives on taking had no idea the woman with $5 was about to become very, very hard to bury. They came for Faith, expecting her to run. Instead, she went to work. Not in Eleanor's office, in her own neighborhood, where she knew every crack stoop and every name behind every door. Because Faith had realized something the lawyers hadn't. She wasn't the only one. Her eviction notice wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern, and she'd been filing the proof into folders for 2 weeks without seeing it. She started with Miss Della, who'd watched Lily 100 times. They raised your maintenance fee 3 times in 1 year? Faith spread the woman's crumpled statements across the kitchen table. Della, look, same fee, same wording, same date as mine. Down to the comma. They told me it was the law, Della said. I'm 73. I believed them. It's not the law. It's a copy-paste. Faith's hands moved fast now. Who else got one? By nightfall, she had 11 families. By the next, the Harris family 3 buildings over, with 4 kids and a notice identical to Della's. They'd all been told the same lie, charged the same phantom fees, marched toward the same engineered eviction. All of them poor, most of them black, every one of them too tired or too scared to fight a glass tower alone. We're not alone anymore, Faith told them, gathered in Della's cramped living room. Separately, we're 11 sad stories nobody prints. Together, we're a pattern. And a pattern is evidence. Eleanor supplied what Faith couldn't. Lawyers, forensic accountants, access. But it was Faith who knocked on the doors. Faith they trusted. Faith who turned a scattered group of frightened tenants into a single voice. Eleanor saw it clearly the night she watched Faith run that room. I've paid consultants millions to do what you just did for free, Eleanor murmured to Nora. She didn't organize them. She reminded them they were worth organizing for. But a pattern of fake fees proved fraud. It didn't prove Faith's kindness was real, and the competency hearing turned entirely on that. With the hotel footage gone, they needed another way to prove Eleanor had been lucid, robbed, and helped, not deluded and exploited. So Faith rebuilt that night from scraps. Her transit card showed the exact time she'd boarded a bus 6 blocks from the shelter. A rideshare driver who'd crawled past in the storm had dashcam video. Partial, rain blurred, but enough to timestamp 2 figures walking toward Ruby's diner, one draping a coat over the other. Nora pulled Eleanor's own phone records, proving the call she'd overheard was real. Piece by piece, the truth reassembled itself, not from one magic tape, but from a dozen ordinary people who'd happened to be telling the truth. There was only one piece Faith couldn't manufacture, a witness who'd seen it all, up close, and could swear Eleanor arrived robbed and entirely in her right mind. Walter Briggs. Faith found him at the end of his shift, and she didn't beg. She just said, "They're going to say she was confused that night, that I took advantage. You were there. You know what really happened." She paused. "I'm not going to ask you to risk your pension for me. I know what that costs. I just need you to know that if you stay quiet, they win, and a lot more families lose their homes." Walter said nothing. Faith left. But that night, Walter sat at his kitchen table with his pension folder on one side and his grandkid's photo on the other. And he thought about a young woman who'd walked home in the freezing rain with no coat because a stranger needed it more. He thought about the man who'd bought his silence with a smile and a threat. And he understood, finally, that there are some things a pension can't buy back. In the morning, Walter called the reporter, Grace Sullivan, the same one who'd run the smear, and said the 4 words that would crack the whole thing open. "I lied. I'm sorry." Grace, who'd been uneasy about the story from the start, agreed to hold the next piece and verify everything Faith had assembled. The truth now had a witness, a pattern, and a paper trail. Across town, Vance and Spencer raced to finalize the eviction and the competency ruling before any of it could surface, not knowing that the woman they'd tried to bury had spent the week quietly digging them a hole of their own. The hearing was held in a wood-paneled room on the 40th floor of the Whitmore Tower, the same tower where, weeks earlier, a stranger had reduced Faith's whole life to a number. Now she sat in the back row, in a borrowed blazer, and waited. At the front, Spencer's lawyer laid it out with surgical calm. A chairwoman who'd dismissed her security and vanished into the night, found weeping and disoriented at a public bus stop, latched on to an unknown woman of no means, diverted company resources, behaved erratically ever since. "We take no joy in this," the lawyer said, "but love sometimes means protecting our parents from themselves. We asked the court to find Mrs. Whitmore incapable of managing her own affairs. Spencer wore the expression of a man already counting his win. Beside him, Bradley would not look at anyone. Then Eleanor stood. She had declined a lawyer for this part. She walked to the center of the room, unhurried, and when she spoke, her voice was the one that had built an empire. Steady, precise, devastatingly clear. "My son says I was disoriented that night," she began. "Let me tell you exactly how disoriented I was." And she reconstructed it. The time she'd left the penthouse, to the minute. The extension she'd picked up, and the words she'd heard. Spencer's words, about waiting for nature to take its course. The corner where she'd dismissed her driver. The bench. The young man who'd lifted her wallet and phone from her left coat pocket while she wept. She named the streets in order. She described the temperature, the broken gutter, the number on the last bus that passed. She recited it all without a single note, without a single pause, the way only a perfectly sound mind can. The court reporter's keys clattered to keep up. Two of the directors at the side table exchanged a glance. This was not the rambling of a woman losing her grip. This was a scalpel. "A confused old woman doesn't remember the route," Eleanor said. "She remembers it because every second of it is carved into her. I was robbed of everything I owned that night, and the only person in this city who stopped to help me was a girl who had less than the thief did." She turned, slowly, to face her sons. "I wasn't broken that night, Spencer. I was awake, for the first time in years." The lawyer rose, recovering. "Mrs. Whitmore, sentiment isn't evidence. A good memory for one bad night doesn't prove sound judgment over a billion-dollar company. There's no record of any of this. The hotel footage was lost in the storm. The police report is thin, and the only witness is a young woman with every reason to invent a fairy tale. The footage was lost." "The hotel footage was destroyed," said a voice from the doorway. Walter Briggs stepped into the room, cap in his hands, terrified and certain in equal measure. "I was the doorman that night. I saw Mrs. Whitmore come in, soaked, robbed, but sharp as a blade. And I saw the young lady who brought her, who wouldn't even take a towel for herself." He swallowed. "A man named Preston Vance told me to forget it, threatened my pension. I let him, and I've been ashamed every day since. The footage wasn't lost in the storm. He had it erased." "I'll swear to that anywhere you want." The room shifted. The lawyer faltered, and Faith stood up in the back. "While we're correcting the record," she said, walking forward, setting a thick folder on the table, "you should see what else Mr. Vance has been doing with the Whitmore name." She opened it. 11 families, then 30. Identical fake fees, phantom repairs, engineered evictions, all targeting the poorest tenants in the city, all run through Vance Property Group. I'm one of them. So is she. She gestured to the door, where Della Monroe stood with the Harris family and a dozen others, who had ridden the elevator up into a world they'd only ever cleaned. Della's voice shook, but didn't stop. "I paid that man fees that don't exist for 3 years. I almost lost the only home my grandbabies know." One by one, the others spoke. 4 kids worth of the Harris family, a widow, a veteran. Real faces, real names, filling a room built to keep them out. Some of them had never been higher than the lobby of a building like this. Now they stood on the 40th floor and refused to be small. The directors who'd come to rubber stamp a competency ruling were now staring at a fraud case unfolding in real time. This was the public reveal Vance had spent so much money to prevent, and he wasn't even there to stop it. Spencer's calm finally cracked. "This is a circus. None of this is relevant to my mother's competency." "It's entirely relevant," Eleanor said, "to yours." And that was when Bradley stood up. "Spence, stop." His voice broke on his brother's name. He pulled a phone from his jacket with a shaking hand. "I can't. I'm sorry. I can't do this." He set it on the table and pressed play, and Spencer's recorded voice filled the room. Talking to Preston Vance, weeks ago, about burying the tenant complaints, about pushing the competency petition through fast, about how once mother's declared unfit, Vance's little housing problem disappears with her. The 2 schemes had been one scheme all along, and Bradley had recorded it. "He kept telling me it was for the family," Bradley said, to his mother, to the room, to himself. But Mom, you were never confused. We were. We had everything you gave us, and we still wanted more, and that man made it sound reasonable. Tears ran openly down his face. She gave you her last $5. I was about to help them take your whole life. I don't want to be that. I'd rather have nothing and be able to look at myself. Eleanor crossed the room and took her younger son's face in both hands. The boy who had laughed on the phone, and the man who had just chosen conscience over a fortune. That, she said softly, is the first thing you've inherited from me that was ever worth anything. The petition collapsed in minutes. Preston Vance was arrested within the week. Fraud, tenant abuse, witness tampering. Spencer's name came off every account and every door. And before the room emptied, Eleanor turned to the reporter, Grace Sullivan, whose recorder was already running, and gave her the only line she'd ever need. "Print this," Eleanor said. "I spent 50 years building things people could inherit. It took a girl with $5 to teach me the truth." She looked at Faith. "Kindness is the only inheritance no one can steal." In the back of the room, Faith Carter, the gold digger, the con artist, the stray, pressed a hand to her mouth and let herself cry. Just this once, in public. She had walked home in the rain with empty hands, believing no one had seen. The whole city had just seen. And for once, the seeing landed on the right side of the truth. Spring came to Atlanta, and with it, the keys. The reward when it came was nothing like the checkbook Faith had slid back across her kitchen table months before. Eleanor had learned the lesson the hard way. You don't hand Faith Carter a gift. You hand her a fight worth having. She rewrote her will first. Not in a lawyer's office, but at Faith's second-hand kitchen table, with Lily drawing pictures beside them. The bulk of the Whitmore fortune would no longer pass to her sons by blood. It would fund the Whitmore Community Housing Fund, built to undo, building by building, exactly what Preston Vance had done. And the person Eleanor named to run it wasn't a consultant or a banker. "I'm offering you a job," Eleanor told her. "Director of the fund, real authority, real salary, real accountability, and the hardest work you'll ever do. You'll answer to me, and I'll answer to you, and neither of us will ever owe the other a thing." She slid the offer across the table, the same gesture as the checkbook, reversed. "This isn't charity, Faith. It's the best hire I'll ever make. You already did the job for free. I'm just catching up." Faith looked at it for a long moment. Then she signed. Her first 3 calls were not to strangers. They were to Della Monroe, whose fake fees were erased and whose home was now hers outright. To the Harris family, 4 kids and a lease that finally meant what it said. And to a young mother across town, 3 days from eviction, who answered the phone braced for bad news and instead heard a voice say, "Ms. Carter, from the Housing Fund, we're not putting you out, we're helping you stay." Bradley came to work at the fund too, at the bottom, hauling boxes, learning the names of the people his family had nearly erased. It was Faith's one condition, and Eleanor agreed. If he wants to inherit the right thing, he can earn it like everyone else. Slowly, clumsily, he did. On a warm evening, the 3 of them sat on Faith's stoop. Eleanor, Faith, and Lily, sticky with popsicle, and watched the street where 5 limousines had once caused a scandal. Now it was just a street, with kids on bikes and a woman who'd kept her home. "You know what you did that night in the rain?" Eleanor said quietly. "You treated me like I mattered when I had nothing to give you back. Nobody had done that in 30 years. Faith bumped her shoulder gently against the old woman's. "Welcome to mattering," she said. And Eleanor Whitmore, who had owned half a city and almost died unloved in it, finally laughed like she meant it. 1 year later, on a cold night that smelled like the first one, Faith stood at a bus shelter, the same bus shelter, and handed a shivering teenager a hot meal and a bus card and her own scarf. "You don't even know me," the kid said. "Doesn't matter," Faith answered. "You're cold and you're scared. I know enough." She didn't notice the young woman watching from across the street, a single mother of her own, tired and broke and learning something just by seeing it. That was the thing about kindness Faith had finally understood. It was never really about the $5. It was about who watched you give it, and what they decided to do the next time it was their turn to stop. or keep walking. If Faith's $5 moved something in you tonight, hit that like button and subscribe so this kind of story keeps finding you. And tell me in the comments, would you have stopped at that bus stop in the rain? Yo, low-key? Small acts of kindness be the loudest things you ever do for a. You never know whose life you changing when you stop for a stranger. Give from the bottom of your pile, not the top. That's where real love lives.